Hey, what's going on guys? It's Blocky here, and I'm going to be talking about a little bit of an addiction that I have, and that is, I love reading webtoons more than anything, honest to God. Like, I probably read more webtoons than I do anything else. I don't have a lot of manga reading experience. I am getting more manga reading experience, but I read a crap ton of webtoons, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of them. Now, on my channel, I've only ever talked about two webtoons, two of the most popular webtoons out there, which are God of High School and Tower of God. I've talked about both of those, and I only really talked about those because I had watched the anime first and then ended up reading the webtoons, but I'm just going to be talking about some webtoons, and this is not scripted, so this is just going to be my thoughts on a bunch of just random webtoons, and if you want to see more content of the webcomic or webtoon stuff, then be sure to subscribe and leave a like on this video if you want to see more of that kind of stuff, because I will be happy to make it, definitely, for sure. And the first series I'm going to be talking about is a bit of a newer series. It's called Your Throne. That series is very, very good. I'm just gonna go out there and say that real quick. So it's basically about these two characters. There's two main characters. One of them is like the Duke's daughter, I think, and the other one is basically like the princess, or like the emperor's son's wife or whatever. But she wasn't always that. She used to just be a random noble. But she has like this unique power that can, like, I think, heal people or whatever, and the emperor is trying, or the emperor's son is trying to use that power for his own, gain. And over time we learn, the emperor's son is a piece of crap, and over time the story is developing now where both characters have switched bodies, and they're trying to work together in their switched bodies to not only grow themselves as people, but as well as try to stop the emperor's son from, basically getting power, because if he gets power, everything's going to be messed up. And it's a really good read. Everything about it is super good. There are a lot of moments that like really help to grow the characters, especially since both of the two characters knew each other before. They were both like friends turned enemies, based off certain situations that had happened before they had switched bodies, and after they had switched bodies, their lives were so different from each other that it allows them and forces them to grow as characters. Like the Duke's daughter, Medea is her name. She switches body with the other girl. I forgot her name, but the other girl is so soft and so timid and has never had a lot of interactions with people, so Medea inside of her body has to act like that and has to be this different kind of person, and it forces her to think differently and forces her to have to be different in a lot of situations. And I think it's super, super interesting, as well as with the other girl in Medea's body, because Medea is so strong-willed and has always been feared by a lot of people. This girl who is so timid and so soft has kind of had to grow a backbone, and she's been slowly learning, because there's only one person who knows that they've switched bodies, and he's been helping them kind of figure all this out. He's an ally and the love interest of Medea. Well, not really the love interest, I guess he's in love with her, but she, I don't know, really loves him back. I don't really know. I think she does, but it's hard to say. We don't really know that. But either way, that series is phenomenal. And I've tried to give as little spoilers as possible. I've just kind of given a little like synopsis, but it is definitely a good series. Really, really phenomenal. You should definitely read it if you haven't. So the next one I'm going to talk about is actually a pretty popular series, but it's also one that I kind of held off on for a long time, and that's True Beauty. The reason why I held off on this for such a long time is the art style. The art style to me looked really, really like girly, and looked like it was definitely targeted toward like that like 12 to 15-year-old girl. And definitely after I read the synopsis too, I was like, yeah, this is definitely targeted towards that like 12 to 15-year-old girl. It's about makeup and all this other kind of stuff. But then I was like, you know what? It's constantly at the top of the romance list. I might give it a go. And I did. I did give it a go. And it is phenomenal. It is absolutely one of the best romance webtoons I've read. It is really, really good. For a lot of reasons. First off, the characters are super, super interesting. And the two main boys are very, very good. Not only are their designs great for obvious reasons, but their character development and their characters in general are great characters. Suho is a half Japanese, half Korean man, and we get to learn a lot about him in the first half of the story, in the high school half, where he is basically he's kind of like this like weeb, but he's also like the son of this famous actor, and he kind of wants to try to get away from that because his father is, you know, not really been around and all that kind of stuff, and he wants to kind of be independent and have his own kind of life and stuff. And he's the first person to see our protagonist for who she really is, because our protagonist hides behind like 20 million layers of makeup, and he's the first one to he actually saw her first without the makeup and still fell in love with her because of her personality. And then after he discovered that, you know, the pretty girl from her school is also the ugly girl that he saw in the manga store, it just made it even better because now they can interact at school and they were friends and all this other stuff. And it was great to see that interaction. In the second half of the story, we learn more about Sujin, the second protagonist, the second male of the story. We do get to see him in the first half quite a lot as well, but we learn more about him in the second half definitely, which is where we're at now. And definitely his character has grown a lot. There was a certain point in the story in the second half especially that we really got to see that he's kind of the clingy, jealous type. And I think that's interesting, especially when Suo came back after, you know, years of him being gone. It was interesting to see Sujin kind of get into that mindset, but he's slowly getting out of that. He's still there to protect Jugyung, but he's definitely like getting out of that, like, oh, I'm this clingy guy kind of personality. And I think it's great that, you know, these characters have been growing and developing a lot. Mostly them, the main character, she's kind of been the same, but she's had a funny and interesting personality the entire time, so I think it's fine. She has been learning to grow because even Sujin, who fell in love with her because of her personality, but he didn't really know her true face, but he has discovered her true face and knows that, and he still loves her despite that. And I think that is great. That's just a testament to his personality and who he is as a person, because, you know, he had fell in love with this person. He thought he knew what she looked like, and, you know, when her true face is revealed, he still, you know, loves her and still there to support her. And I think that's great and interesting. It is definitely a really good read, and you should definitely read it if you haven't, because definitely don't sleep on it like I did. It is really, really good. And we're going to go with another newer one. This one is called Mom, I'm Sorry. Now this one is about this guy. In the first chapter, this guy, the main character, his mom is on her deathbed. She had died from like some illness, and he was basically like a really, really shitty son. And this guy, this other guy comes in and is like, look, I can make you a deal. I can, you know, take many years off your life and give your mom, you know, a bunch of years left in hers. And, you know, she can do whatever she wants and live the life she never got to live. And, you know, the main character, he makes this deal. And the other guy, you know, he slips up a little bit and accidentally tells the main character how he's going to die, which is he's going to die in an accident. That's all we know. And so it's basically an interesting, it's a funny story about these two characters kind of interacting and how they're not to accidentally slip up and stuff. And in the most recent arc, they actually did slip up. One character has now figured out the truth, and it's super funny because, you know, these other characters in the sidelines are trying to figure out, hey, you know, why is these two acting weird? You know, sometimes in private they, you know, go by mom and all that stuff, and it's like, oh, that's funny. And we have this love interest character. He's one of the main characters too. He's like the main side character. He's super interesting. He's like this super popular golfer, and he recently has been having a lot of trouble with a lot of things, and he's recently in the most recent chapters, he's worried that you know, his popularity is going to affect her life, the mom's life, because, you know, it's kind of like, oh, you know, I'm super famous, I'm super popular, all these people like me, and I don't want that to affect her. And the son, the other main character, has been like, yeah, I understand. And, you know, he's basically kicked him out of the apartment and all that stuff. They're neighbors, and so that kind of stuff has happened. And it's super interesting, but the golfer dude is definitely fighting back now. I forgot all the characters' names, by the way. I'm doing this off the top of my head. Yeah, so the golfer dude is, you know, fighting back now. He wants to, you know, be there and be friends and be able to hang out again without having to worry about the media and all that stuff, which is understandable, you know. It's like, he should be able to live his life. He should be able to fall in love with who he wants to fall in love with and all this type of stuff without having to worry about the media. And the son should understand this, but he's also trying to be super protective of his mom, which is understandable because, you know, he's gone through all this to bring his mom back, and he wants her to be safe and wants her to be happy. And, you know, that's understandable. And I love the interactions between those three characters specifically, because you get to really see a lot of how, you know, things go, because him and the golfer dude are friends, and Obviously the golfer dude likes the mom, and it's super interesting to see that type of stuff. Super cool. Anyways though, the next one I'm going to be doing is actually extremely new. The other two, True Beauty and Mom I'm Sorry, are new, but they're not like hella new. Omniscient Reader though is a super new story. It's only like 10 or 11 or 12 chapters long or something like that so far. So it's not been going on for that long at all. And it is amazing. So it's basically, I guess you can kind of say it's a reverse isekai, because it's like another world kind of enters the human world. But this guy, the main character, he's able, it's basically based off of this webtoon that this main character had read. This main character is the only person who had ever read this webtoon, or the web novel I think is what it is actually. So it's a web novel. This dude had read like all 300 chapters over, many years of his life. And he was the only person who's ever read it. So he has this secret ability where he knows what's going to happen before it happens and everything. He knows everything that's going to happen as it goes on. And he's the only person that knows this, and he's able to like manipulate situations and figure things out in a way. And it's super interesting to see how he solves, a lot of problems that other people wouldn't be able to solve super easily, just because he knows the knowledge of what's going to happen and what certain things do and other things like that from reading the novel. And we actually get to run into the protagonist of the novel he had read, who is another person who kind of knows what's going on. He's like some person who like jumps through like different, I guess, lives or something like that is what it's called, or something like that. And he's, repeated this story over and over again multiple times, so he knows what's going to happen. And it's basically like, who's the real protagonist? The actual protagonist of Omniscient Reader or the protagonist of the novel? It's kind of like that. And it's super interesting to kind of see a weak person become somebody super strong just by having the knowledge of knowing what's going to happen. And although, all these actions that he's doing, they're not really changing the story much, and even if it did, he would still know more than the average person in this current time, because obviously we're in the short term right now, and we're not like super long into the game where everybody knows what everything is and all that type of stuff. But honestly, Omniscient Reader is a really good read, and definitely give it a go, because it is super good. 100% would recommend. Okay, so the second to last one on this list, there's three. I've written down those last three. There's three more I want to talk about. The third to last one is Ghost Theater. It's sort of new, but not really. It's been going on for about 40 something chapters, so it's not super new, but it's kind of new. It's really good, and I'm pretty sure based off what's going on in the most recent arc, it seems like this is the last arc. It might not be, but based off what's going on, it is. Anyways though, let's get into the like review, description, whatever. So Ghost Theater is a story about this famous actress girl got into an accident, and her parents had died in this accident, and she had lost the ability to have emotional, show her emotions on her face. She completely lost that ability, so basically her acting career is over, because obviously, you can't act if you can't show emotion. So she goes to this place called the Ghost Theater. She sees these crazy ghosts and all this stuff there, and she's basically invited to participate in the theater, and she's doing this to try to get the feeling in her face back, try to get her emotions back and stuff. And over this course of this, we get to see a lot of different people, how they've died, what they regret, and all this other type of stuff, and it's super interesting. And in the most recent arc, we actually get to see something super interesting. So the person who invited our main character to the Ghost Theater is also a person that she had acted with when she was a little kid. And in the most recent arc, she'd also run into the person who had killed her parents, who also so happens to be the person who was the manager of the person who invited her to the Ghost Theater. So it's going full circle. And like I said, the most recent arc, obviously, it's like you're kind of going full circle, which means it kind of feels like it's coming to an end, because in this most recent arc, obviously, you get the person who killed her parents and made her lose all her emotions, as well as the person who connects her to the other main character, which is just super interesting. And the way they do all the characters and how they show us characters' emotions and their backstories and how they died, how they lived, all this type of stuff is super interesting and super cool, because we get to see so much of how people regret things or don't regret things. Because we even got to see one girl who, she had a shitty father, and she was lying and manipulating everybody. Even as a ghost, she lied and manipulated everybody because she wanted revenge on her father for being such a shitty person. And I thought that specific arc was super interesting, especially since that one actually caught me by surprise because her lies even had me under suspicion, dude. I didn't catch her until the very last second. I was like, damn. But no, seriously, Ghost Theater is really, really good, and you should definitely give it a read. Okay, so this next one is one that has been talked about by a few really large YouTubers, but I think it's still worth talking about, and that's Let's Play. Obviously, it's the one with the YouTuber in it. It's a really good read, though. So it's basically the two main characters are Sam and Marshall Long, I think is what his name is. It's been a little bit because they're on hiatus right now, but so those two characters are like kind of like the two main like kind of romantic characters. Obviously, they're not in a relationship or anything, but the story is basically this YouTuber played the game that the main character had made, and the main character was a really, really big fan of Marshall Long, and Marshall Long had completely bashed her game because he didn't know how to play it and he didn't bother going through all the instructions, and her game and her herself got so much hate over it and all this other stuff, and you know, she had lost faith in, you know, him as a person because she had, you know, was in the hospital for so long. Marshall was there to, you know, lift her spirits and all that stuff, and then, you know, all of a sudden now he, you know, gives all this hate to her. You know, obviously Marshall didn't give her hate on purpose, he was just playing her game and critiquing it, but you know, it happens that his fans are pieces of shit, which, you know, it happens to everybody. But as it turns out, Marshall moves in right next door to her, and you know, things get there, and it's interesting to see because we get to see this girl who had her dreams about her biggest like idol, you know, shattered, and then he moves in next to her, and we get to see the interactions of how he's kind of redeeming himself. And recently he even replayed her game on his channel and played it correctly and has actually, you know, given her good feedback and all this other stuff. And it's super interesting to see how they interact and how they've grown in a relationship. And Sam, specifically the main character, we get to see her grow into not so much being a shy person and how she's growing out of her shell a lot by meeting all these different people. Like her boss, for instance, is somebody who right now she's very romantically interested in, and it's super interesting to see those two's interactions, very much so. Now obviously those two are not going to get together in the end because it's a romance between Marshall and Sam, but it's super interesting to see how Sam grows out of her shell and grows into a strong person, somebody who she needs to be able to be who she wants to be. She wants to be a super big game developer. Her dad wants her to be the CEO of the company, but you know, either way, whatever she does, she needs to be strong-willed and she needs to be able to do what she wants to do and not be pushed around by people because they say she should do something. And I think that the story's definitely heading in that direction. I don't know how much longer it is, but probably like 80 or 90 more chapters, maybe 100 chapters, another season basically. But it is definitely a really good read, and you should definitely read it. It is really good. And now, last but not least, we are going to be talking about my favorite webtoon, Age Matters. This webtoon is amazing, very, very phenomenal. Oh my god, is it so good. Okay, so Age Matters is a story about a romance between a 23-year-old CEO and a 29-year-old who had just gotten out of a relationship with her shitty ex-fiance. And it is super good because we get to see, you know, how this works. So basically the story starts off with our main character, Rose. She is in her friend's apartment, and her friend works for this 23-year-old CEO, and her friend leaves and goes on a vacation with her boyfriend and leaves Rose there to take care of the CEO. Rose is obviously getting the pay instead of her friend. And eventually Rose meets the CEO on accident, and they end up interacting with each other, and Rose, instead of being the cleaning person for him like she was supposed to be, now ends up being his secretary. And a lot of stuff goes on between them and a bunch of other people that the CEO knows, a lot of big shots of other companies and other things, and we get to see a lot of interactions of how Rose, somebody who's not used to that high society and how that stuff, and how she interacts with all these people, and how she makes friends with all these different people and is able to basically stand her ground. And it's super, super fun and interesting to see, you know, a woman who has lost everything at the beginning of the story to now where we're currently at is able to stand her ground and able to fall in love again. And it's super, super cool. And the most recent stuff that's going on, her ex-fiance is back working with the father of the 23-year-old CEO, and it is interesting to see how this is going to go, because obviously you know, ex-fiance is a piece of shit, and they're basically setting up the CEO's father to be a piece of shit too. So it's kind of interesting to see how this is going to play out and how it's going to go. And it's the way the story is written is super interesting. The characters are all amazingly written. All the side characters, all the main characters, they're all super interesting. And it's super, super good read. And definitely check it out because you will not be disappointed, I promise you. Anyways, this was just a review of a bunch of webtoons I've been reading recently, and you know, a bunch of webtoons I have read. There are a bunch more I've read and wanted to talk about, but I don't have a lot of time for that. So if you want to go ahead and see more videos on webtoons, I can definitely do that. Anyways though, be sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe if you're new. See ya.